When I first started consulting, getting accurate operational data into the cloud and costing it was probably one of the things we spent the most time on. And I'm here to say that John Deere Operations Center now has almost made that seamless between Operations Center and Harvest Profit. Available online 24/7, use it to plan your work, keep records, and analyze results so you can reduce errors and make smarter decisions for next year. Plus, it's free to set up and try out. See why thousands of farmers already trust it in their operations at johndeere.ca/precisionag.
Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, distributed under the Real Agriculture Media Network and brought to you by the Heber Group of Companies. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, quick shout out, since I got Taylor on today with me, had just under 100 participants in the Farmer Coach program this last week, came through Saskatoon. Love the sessions. I get probably just as much out of them as they do, but I also like the stage where agriculture is today. I had a group that they weren't doom scrolling. They weren't telling me that agriculture's not making no money and poor me. I had progressive farms in the room saying, you know what, we're going to make money. And if we don't make money, how do we make money? So it was a good week. So I've been doing a lot of talking. So I'm hoping you're ready to do some of the talking today, Taylor.
Looking forward to it, Ev.
Perfect. So I also know you spent yesterday out at the farm doing the, let's call it the post-seeding meeting.
Yes.
So give me an idea of what those look like for some of our listeners of what a pre-seeding or post-seeding meeting looks like. And then we'll move into some tech, because obviously this is the opener for Nick Horob, who is the man we talk about probably more than any other inventor at Maverick, the man who built Harvest Profit and then sold it to Mother Deere. So this is our opener to him. So let's tie that in later on.
Super excited to listen to the podcast with Nick. Like I said, he's made a great product, and he's a really innovative thinker for sure. Pre-seeding meetings, I think a lot of the industries really started to get into those. Sitting down with the guys on the team and making sure everyone knows, where we're going, what we're doing, what we're seeding, why that's important, what our controls are, what the safety issues are, different things like that. The post-seeding meeting, I've had the privilege of sitting in on a couple different farms running these now. They're becoming more popular. And to a degree, it's the decompress from seeding, what worked, what didn't work. But then at the same time, it's, what's going to be important in the next, 3 to 6 months, right? So yesterday, we actually met offsite, which was actually really cool to see happen as well. I've never been to an offsite one. And there was the COO, Jeff was there, right? And the 4 operation managers were there. Actually, the project manager was there, and so was the controller for the farm. And so then I just sat in as a fly on the wall inside that room, and they talked about, what worked well, what didn't work well. You came in for a financial conversation. We touched on some AI tools that they're trying to utilize on the farm. They went through their roles and accountabilities and what works and what needs to be changed. They talked about what the next 12 months of monthly outcomes are, the big important things that need to incur for the next 12 months. And then they set goals for the, coming quarter and what that was supposed to look like. Evan, when we came and talked about financials, what did you cover inside that meeting, and why is that important for the farm management team to see?
Well, I think, honestly, I'm just going to step back a little bit. Is part of this, guys, when we started doing this, it was transparency. We wanted the guys to feel like they were more part of the team, and they were. I mean, I have been out to the farm once, and let's be fair, other than in a boardroom, I haven't been in a piece of equipment for a couple years now. Hashtag desktop farmer. But the big one for me was the transparency with the guys and allowing them to actually tell us what's not working. And this isn't a go out and buy this piece of equipment. That's not what this is. This is hey, this process didn't work, or hey, we ran into an issue here and we troubleshoot it. To the point where we now have a program where they can put in their issues throughout the growing season, so that then we can just tackle them at that meeting instead of, unless they're a to-do right today. It gives us the ability to come back after we've got over the hangover, after seeding, 20 some days sitting in a piece of machinery. You don't want to do it the day after, but a lot longer down. And then on the finance side, we've been pretty transparent with our team. We're not showing them the profitability of the farm or the balance sheet, but we are going deep into the profit and loss metrics, which is, what do they control? Repairs, small tools, office, our controller, that side of the business. Like it comes down to the more transparent you are with them, the more they know how they can affect the farm, the more they're thinking about it. And I think that's been the biggest aha for a lot of these farms that have started doing it. It was just the team culture, and then also just the ability for guys to start looking at the farm as, I control this number, not just I get in a tractor and go back and forth.
It was interesting because one thing that's always nice when we get a chance to really sit with a farm team is we talked on AI for a little bit in the afternoon session. The controller at the farm, Mariah, she's does a lot of pieces with us on that side of the business. And one of the guys on the team said, "Hey, Taylor, slow down," which I hear that lots. But he said, "Take a step back.
Yes,
let's talk about what these products actually are." And I said, okay, sorry. Gemini is the large language model that we like to use inside. Notebook LM is the RAG model that we like to utilize. The purpose of, one is the straight prompting. The other one is to give it just specific sources that you want to utilize. And then we got able to talk about use cases and what we could possibly use it for. And there was a guy in the room, one of the managers, that we downloaded it on his phone because he hadn't been utilizing it in a big way yet. And I think the big thing I always want to remind farms is what we said in the room there that day. And actually Josh, the technical lead, was also reinforcing, use it in your personal life. Because actually using it in your personal life is going to give you the ideas you never had of how to use it in your business life, right? And so I think Nick, probably in the session this afternoon or coming after this, will cover a lot of really cool things that they're working on inside of that. But two that I'd really like to share is the ability to have pre-built prompts. We call them gems. In the ChatGPT world, they're called GPTs. But
okay,
yeah,
I'm going to pause you for a second. How old is Taylor?
38.
Okay, I'm 43. And when you say gem, right over my head. So everybody younger than me can make fun of me by all means. So there's some guys who have never touched AI here.
Yeah.
So what's a prompt and what's a gem?
So you go to the App Store, whether that's Google Play for you, whether that's Apple App Store, and you download the Gemini app, right? That gives you the ability to have an AI tool in itself. A gem is a pre-built prompt. A prompt in itself is you just going in and saying, how do I do this?
Ask a question. A
really good prompt generally tells you what the AI should be thinking as, like you're an expert mechanic, right? And then you give it more details. Now, all of a sudden you start realizing that a really good prompt is relatively long. If you want to always have that type of prompt with that type of output always kicked out, you turn that into a gem, which is really just a saved prompt, right?
So you got 5 or 6 questions that would narrow it down to, if you're going to ask any question, it's actually going to utilize these 5 other questions to narrow it to a certain source.
You're an expert mechanic. I want you to give me the troubleshooting tips for the problem that I will submit. I want them to come out in this format, and I want you to tell me what tools I would need to troubleshoot those things, right? You go through the steps of what you want it to give, and this is the output format I want it to be in. So you save this gem. So the one that we're going to be testing on the farm here is a mechanical troubleshooting one. It's not actually repairs, it's troubleshooting. Can operations team members utilize this thing to speed up their ability to figure out what's wrong before they phone the mechanic, right? And so I think that these really standard use cases are super important. I know that you said at the Farmer Coach session, someone had read the newsletter that we put out a couple months back where we were attaching the Saskatchewan crop protection guide to a Notebook LM. Notebook LM
is
another app you can download through the store. It is another Google AI tool, but
we're loading up your phone, guys. Just by the way, here we go.
It's a tool that won't generally look on the internet outside, so it won't hallucinate. It really just looks at the source material you give it. So the only thing we've attached to this one Notebook LM that we've created is the Saskatchewan Crop Protection Guide. And then that guide, you can just prompt that entire 600-page catalog by just saying, hey, what's the application rate for Liberty and in crop canola, and what's the stage that it should be at when I do that? And it will bring all that information for you and not go out on the internet and hallucinate. Whereas we want the mechanic troubleshooting one to go on the internet and say, oh, we found the piece of machinery you're talking about. Here's the potential issues that we have inside of it. And here's, whether it's a Reddit thread or something that people have had this issue before and potentially have solved it, right? And separating those two worlds.
do one more thing for me.
Yes.
What's a hallucination, and why would we want to avoid them and use verification?
Hallucination is the ability for either a misinterpretation of a prompt, in my opinion, or for it to find information that's not actually relevant. The thing that we have to be careful of with tools like AI is they want to please the person giving the information to them, right? They want to give you an answer you want to hear. So we need to be careful of the information that comes back from them. Whereas when you go to something like Notebook LM, it has no stake in the game. It's trying to find relevant stuff from the source you gave it. So we're always using Gemini with a second sober thought in the background to make sure that the information that we're getting from it is actually relevant and makes sense. And so, again, that's why we're saying it's a troubleshooting guide at this point in time. It's not a repair guide yet.
Yeah, so it is really good for off the start. And what I mean by that is, data entry, for example. If it takes me forever to enter a million sheets into a million different areas of our farm, it can do that in massive amounts of saving efficiency and time. Now, at that point, it's still not to the point where we can troubleshoot the repair, but we still need to verify if it tells us how to fix it, more or less, in metaphorical terms. So, I mean, and Nick does a great job talking about this stuff, because that was the one thing I wasn't sure on, because he does a lot of AI stuff, whether he was using it to build these huge models and new spreadsheets and programs, or if he was using it at the lower level, which is just the data in that side. And that's essentially what he's doing. He's teaching farms, because he does a course. He's teaching farms at the lower level to use it for efficiencies off the start. And whether that's eliminating, I mean, even on the bookkeeping side, we see it a lot within the business side. And I'm not in the farm side as much, so I don't see it as much as you do, obviously. But it's that side that we're seeing the biggest benefits in. And even to the fact where, another story from one of our clients, we do equipment deals for a lot of guys, and we have quotes from all our clients, so we can compare, what they're paying here and there. And he's cannibalizing my business, essentially, because he went out and scrubbed all of the Pattison Ag files of, here's tractors of this size or scale or close selling and what their retail is. Then he went to the Ritchie brothers and did the same thing. So he sends me a spreadsheet with a million different quotes from what they're selling at Ritchie, what they're selling at the dealership. And these are MSRP, so obviously there's a little bit of flick, but in the end, it's like he's already done his own due diligence. So I just had to run some of the ratios. So there is a lot of practical use cases that just on the lower level of just gathering information even.
Well, and I think Nick will speak to it in the podcast, but there's a lot of people that are like, I'm going to never have SaaS on my farm again, software as a service. Like, I'm never going to have a cloud-based tool again. And I'm not saying that that's not in the 10, 15 year future. That might be an opportunity as we see these tools grow. But I think there's a lot of people stepping over the practical use cases that are here to accelerate your team, to make it so that they don't have to do the elementary component of their job anymore as much, but they still need to be the human in the loop. That is looking at the information and saying, does this make sense? And does this actually speed me up? Or is it giving me an answer that it believes I want to hear that's probably going to steer us down the wrong road, right?
Yeah. So let's skip a little bit. So you and I attended Western Sales grand opening in Rosetown. So a shout out to obviously Carl, the CEO, and the team out there in McGrath. And that is an unbelievable building, by the way. So I'll let you go first. What were your takeaways from the day, I guess, out there?
Well, I will talk about the day, but I have to say they had this Vidmar machine there.
I knew you were going there.
Right. And it vertically stacked all of their small parts inventory inside the machine. That was super cool. Anyone that gets an opportunity to just bug a parts guy for a second and go take a look at that Vidmar. The building itself is, state of the art for sure. And then to be able to hold a conference, full-sized conference, and not even know that you're actually at the back end of a shop in what I would call the PID room, where they can set up drills and stuff in the wintertime. That was an amazing facility. We, obviously got to watch you speak. I know a lot of the topic matter that Evan speaks on.
Yeah, because you created most of it.
Jamie Hinman got to speak, though, the CTO of John Deere as well. And just to see someone that sees technology at that level and understand, where their thought process is and where the world is going. And then just to remind us that there's lots of sprayers out there nowadays that have 6 GPUs on the machine itself, 30 cameras, and in a 10-year span, how much more accurate and how much more processing speed those cameras have on board in-house to be able to do. And then, really reinforcing that Starfire is going to become an opportunity to have, Starlink devices on the top of these machines in these poor cellular areas, with HGV, for example, being along the Manitoba border and having some pretty rough cell service on the east side of the province there, what that's going to do for the connectivity of these machines, right?
Well, and the ease of installation was what I was surprised at probably the most. Yeah, you can go out and buy a brand new one and they're probably already preloaded up there. But to be fair, I think he was at the farm and said those little mobiles, they're a plug and play. So essentially it's a matter of minutes, not hours, to have installation across all the implements on the farm of just the mobile ones, which I love in my truck in the sunroof at 110. She works like a charm. I got full Wi-Fi no matter where I go. So,
well, and I think the See and Spray technologies and all those things are really awesome. But I think the one thing that a lot of people we've just got used to is when I first started consulting in agriculture, one of the biggest things people were trying to get to do was to have accurate data in the cloud, operational data that we could actually cost. And it used to take like 3 softwares, 4 softwares, and there was a ton of pushing in the middle and a lot of scrubbing the entire time. And whether it's, work planner capabilities up front, whether it's harvest profit integrated really well now on the back end, that's not even really a conversation anymore. It's more just about, did we get it set up in advance? But in season, we've been talking with farms of all different colors that utilize, op center at the end and harvest profit, but there you've got different machinery underneath. And I'm just amazed on every one of these calls as we're helping people walk through some of the smaller pieces, how much easier that entire process has come. And so I think we take this moment in agriculture and not remember how much the technology has progressed in the background. And we've kind of gone nose blind to all the improvements that have actually happened in all fleets across the board, let alone, like I said, when a guy like Jamie gets up there and starts speaking about where they're going.
Oh, yeah.
It's an amazing space to be in right now.
Yeah, and for me, I'll second you. The parts thing was probably the coolest thing of the day, and watching, it's got 50 different tables with, let's call it 200 parts on a table, and you just punch in the key, and it's like those cars over in Germany where they just stack cars up because they don't have a lot of land mass. So yeah, that was cool. The building itself is incredible. Like, it's monstrous. And they did a great job with the event. Guys got to walk through, see the wash bays, they probably had 20 combines sitting in there and 10 sprayer. Like, it's massive. But then the big one again, Jamie's always the pull. And I love the panels because he has to go through the pain of being asked about subscriptions like he's the one who actually sets them. And again, not to push back at the farmers, and you can throw me hate if you want. You don't have to buy them, but we all know you're going to. So, and 20 years ago, they said we're a technology company, so they kind of gave us foreshadow of what's coming. But the other one is just having the speakers there and stuff. It jogged me a bit, again, going back to your comment of, we always think about technology on the equipment. If I bring it up at Farmer Coach, the first thing they say is, well, autonomy. Yeah, that excites me, but honestly, that's not going to get me out of bed in the morning. It's guys love driving machinery. I think there's going to be more pushback on autonomy than probably any other tech there is, because guys actually like sitting in cabs. For me, it's the business side, which I don't think Deere looks at near enough. Like, I think they see the benefit of JD Ops more on the equipment efficiency and the labor power machinery numbers and that, where you and I spend 90% of our time working with it on a business side of real-time data and financial statements and per acre analysis and contracts and inventory recs. And I think that's where some of the industry's missing the boat, is we go into Claude and we create our own app, and that's great. But the integration that is going to come, and it doesn't matter what color you're having, you can have a Deere bubble on a Case tractor for all I care. But the integration side of Deere and the business side, you're not going to be able to compete with that. And it's not saying don't do it. It's just, I don't see a reason for us to ever go away from that integration tech, because I think it's just going to be on steroids for the next decade.
Well, I think you're 100% right on it, Evan, that most clients probably aren't as blown away as I am about the machinery technology, because I don't see that side of the business as much as they do. They live that all the time, the cameras and the sensors and all that. Whereas we're always in the cloud and the financial side, right? Yeah. But the one thing I think came up that an audience member asked, great, we've got all this technology that's going on, but where's the value in this? And I think it comes back to that moment where we're realizing we're super data rich right now There's a lot of information coming in, and hopefully it's, calibrated and accurate information. But
hopefully, I like how let's just use quotes when we say that, okay?
But the really cool part is we're at insight now as well. I had a client phone us up, and this is an example I shared in the room that day, about 2 weeks ago, and they've got about 10% of their farm underwater. Some of it pre-seed, some of it post-seed. And he said, I want to make sure this is reflected proper in our harvest profit. So we went into his actual scenario and we dropped down his acres, which drove up his costs across all of those acres intentionally because we made sure all his application data stayed the same. We made sure all of his fixed costs stayed the same, and it drove that cost on a per acre basis higher, right? But he also believes at this point in time there's going to be a higher yield. So he was able to adjust that, change his budget pricing scenario, and when I say budget pricing, what he thinks he'll sell the rest of the crop for in his actual scenario.
Because it's already pulled in the contracts in.
And then pulling in a little bit of too wet to seed, but not on all the acres, because some of it was, just flooded after the fact and wasn't too wet to seed. It was just too wet after seeding kind of deal. But to be able to take all of that information and put it in there, that is math that any farmer could absolutely do. I know that without a doubt. The question is, can you get that insight that fast? Can you make those adjustments? And then it makes me flip to the next conversation we're having with a lot of clients right now, is if they don't already have their 2027 crop plans built in harvest profit, building those, because I think HGV bought some nitrogen last week, but then Jeff brought up in the meeting that at the moment phosphorus is out of reach. Like it's just the price is just too far away, but it's not out of reach. The price is too far away. We just believe that it's out of reach. Here's the financials. We can't buy the phos we need to put down and still pencil at the bottom end of the stick, right? And that's what I think real insight is becoming, where you're using these tools to model where we're going, where the ball's going, versus just reconciling where we've been.
Well, and I actually had that thought this morning, to be fair. I got stuck doom scrolling again. I do every morning. I don't know why. I should just stay off. But and you look and everything's negative and then you read one from a guy and some guy said, crop looks good, and he showed a picture, and so some optimism. And then I look at the comment, and the comment is long way from the bin and this and that, and it's like, true, but for me and for you, 2026 is already in the ground. We have very little control over anything that happens right now. We can control some costs, but I mean, I'm even going to push that to the HGV ops team. Like it's their job now, not mine. I set the budget. So technically, like you said, we've already got our 2027 set into harvest profit. And is it in stone? No, you're going to change crops based on prices and stuff. But by having it in there, we can look and say, okay, what's our cost of production based on expenses for this year, which may change slightly. They're not going to change massive unless you do an expansion. And then we look at inputs and the price of grain today, and all of a sudden we've got our 2027 budget done, and it's June 26th. And that allowed us to buy, and I want to say it's 80% or 85% of our nitrogen for next year at this point. And is it paid today? No, guys, we're not putting that kind of money out today, or there'd be obviously be running some finance and carry charges that are significant. But we're having the discussion now of, okay, we've locked that side of the hedge. Now let's look at the canola side. And I mean, we're still bullish, I believe, a little bit at least, as the markets plummet. But in that case, you could close a hedge today on canola with the price of fertilizer we just bought, and there'd be a 10 to 15 to 20% profit. And most guys are praying for that on a normal year. So I think two things. One, get out of the pessimism. I mean, 2026 for most areas, unless you're rained out, looks pretty good. We might be a little late and there's some frost fear, but insurance was good too. So, I mean, agriculture's in a good spot. And then for 2027, all of a sudden, we're already looking at booking possibility of 15 to 20%. And so now the technology and the forward looking, and like you said, you could run those scenarios on a napkin if you want, but that's going to take you hours because inputs change because you got the as applied data. It's in the ground finally. Pricing has changed. You got different contracts. You got to figure out uncontracted versus contracted. Your acres change. So now you got to change your fixed costs across lesser acres. Like this is not a simple thing. And in harvest profit, it took you 5 minutes? Like
the major insight that I think we always forget, ourselves included, is you plan to put down some burn off. Some of it doesn't go down. Some of it turns into a different product, right? You plan to seed, X amount of dollars of fertilizer. You seed 107% of that. Yeah. That drives up the cost across all the acres, right? And those variables all actually trickle down to the bottom line. The one big one, any client that's built a harvest profit budget and then put a harvest profit actual scenario in November of this year and to now, the optimism would shine through very brightly. Because
$12 canola didn't look so good in November.
Oh man, building November harvest profit budgets was not a fun task to lead clients through, to be like, all right, so we've now finished. Just don't look at the bottom line.
Yeah, you're going to work really hard and we are going to lose money.
Right? Whereas now, it's bled into a profitable space or a more profitable space, depending on what the farm is. And I think that's a moment to, kind of have optimism, but also to remember how much management control we can have in certain moments of those times. Whereas in outdoor manufacturing, as I like to call it, there's a lot of things that are well beyond a producer's control. So controlling the things that you are in charge of to hopefully put out of your mind, easier said than done. The things that are not controllable, I think, is where we want to focus our time and energy.
I totally agree. So, a couple of questions left before we jump onto the Nick Horob one. So, what do you think is the biggest holdup on technology? I mean, we've seen the adoption curve in agriculture, and it is slow at that's being generous. So, what do you think is going to speed that up over the next decade, and what do you think is holding guys back, whether it's AI or just simple tech like we just talked about?
I think I'm a little bit nervous that there's going to be a slowdown in adoption, in the next 24 to 36 months, because the amount of tools that are going to come out and somewhat burn people,
overwhelm,
are going well, and maybe won't work because some of them will be generated random tools that we just didn't know, right? But I think one of the biggest issues we have is no one's really sharing what's working. No one's really saying, agromatics on a grain cart scale functions, but these are the things you need to do to make it function well, right? I think those best use cases and sharing amongst farms to farms of what's working for them is really important. The other asterisks I would put into that is I'm saying about how great harvest profit is right now for a lot of our clients and how they're just in there matching products.
And we don't get paid podcast gets paid, but Taylor doesn't get paid for this.
But the gap there, I think that people are misunderstanding is how much effort those clients put in when there was snow on the ground. Mm-hmm. It's really easy right now because the pre-work was done, no different than maintaining a machine during the wintertime. And now you just jump in the thing, make sure everything's all right, pull the dipstick and hit the key. Well, it's not just that simple. What did you do to that tractor all winter long in order to make sure it was in that situation? Yeah, the pre-work is important.
You're not building your harvest profit on June 26th.
No, right? So that's the hard part. We were talking to some clients, or not clients, but people at Rosetown after the session and explaining to them that it's the snow on the ground time that's important. I hope clients are spending very little time in technology in a build perspective when it's summer months. I hope they're spending time reconciling, checking, getting insight to their business. But then, come October, November, I hope we're getting pretty deep back in the weeds about prepping next year's tech stack. I think that's the difference in adoption.
And that was an interesting one I wanted to point out, and I kind of forgot, was I had 3 or 4 guys in the room this week, and a couple of guys had to leave to go spray, and that's fine. I expected it. June, July, we always get the loss of a few members. But these guys were spraying, but they weren't in the cab. And they had JD Ops open, and they were watching, and they were looking the as a plot. Like, all of a sudden, they were controlling the process. And not only that, but trust and guilt are the 2 biggest reasons guys don't get out of the cab sometimes. It's hard not to trust when you see everything that's going on. You're just not sitting in the cab itself. And if you want, jump into the monitor for all I care. But it's an interesting practice when tech is allowing these guys the freedom to sit in a classroom with me or go watch a ball game with their kids or whatever it is, right? Now that technology use case is totally different than just data. It's actually real-time working on the farm.
Well, Jeff and the 4 managers yesterday at the off-site post-seeding meeting all had insight to what was happening on the sprayers that were battling all day in the field as to where they were going to be, where they were going next, and communicating with them via Google Chat and watching their progress in JD Ops.
So we had essentially we had the 5 highest ranking operators / managers at the farm sitting in a hotel conference room, letting a whole bunch of other staff run what could be your most important application tool on the farm, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy to watch.
Okay. How does your role changed? I mean, I know when you started, you were the jack of all trades. Come in and hit the simple button and Taylor build it for me, right? So with the amount of AI that's in the tech and your client base, how as a consultant has your life changed? Because I can tell you how mine has on the finance side, but I want to hear it on the tech side because I think that one's more interesting.
If I can get out of my own way and not always feel like I need to dive deep into a tool and really help clients, we're helping clients better now than we've ever helped them because we're helping them do the work, but they're the ones doing it. And honestly, I had one of my biggest proud papa moments here with a client that we've had for a long time, this week, where a couple of the young guys on the farm have absolutely stepped into what I used to do. And to be honest with you, are doing a better job of it than I could because they have the operational insight of what's actually happening at the farm. And they're reconciled and they're up to date. And I didn't realize how important it is for people on farm to have that knowledge themselves and to have someone potentially helping them guide that conversation, but to really have that knowledge in-house and themselves. And that if properly set up with snow on the ground, in season, it doesn't take that much time. Therefore, they can actually find the time to do it. And they have the best knowledge base to be doing it.
Yeah. So the built to sell model of you'd actually made yourself the key man on these farms. And that cannot work if you want mass production. So if we want to touch more farms, that can't work from a business standpoint. Being the CEO here, that doesn't work for me. But at the same time, for your client bases, they can't have to rely on you to always pick up the phone if they have a problem, right?
100%. And then the AI tools, whether it's in-house development for ourselves or whether it's clients able to troubleshoot, it's amazing what Gemini knows about Harvest Profit or about Agromatics or about any of these tools, let alone hook a Notebook LM up to their self-help documents in order to have it automatically troll those, right? There's so many things that people can do to support themselves in the delivery of how they utilize these products and troubleshoot the issues they're having. So it's really changed our role significantly to a point where we are spending much more time at that coaching and guiding level, which I didn't know would have the value it does have for producers that are willing to get into the technology and do it themselves.
Yeah, it used to be hit the simple button and do it for them. Let's say give them a fish versus teach them how to fish. And now once they get it, no different than that client that sent me the list of equipment and stuff. Once they jump on it, the sky's the limit, I think, internally. If you have the people or yourself that have the time to be the implementer of this stuff and you can actually get to where you understand it, it's no different than having to phone a help desk to figure out your iPhone. The sooner you learn the iPhone, the lot easier it is, right?
The only thing that hurts in it, Evan, is the ego gets hit pretty hard when they're way better at it than you were.
You want to be the dumbest person in the room, Taylor. I told you that from day one. Okay. I thank you for coming on. Thank you for giving your wisdom, Taylor. And the biggest one, guys, is remember, don't be scared of the technology that's coming. Just sit back in the winter months and then look at the implementation side of it, because we see the benefit to the point where we've started actually using it as a farmer coach tool in the background and offering virtual stuff that Taylor's talking about, because we think that our producers are at a level where they'll run with it. So that's our guidance going forward. So
awesome. Thanks, Evan.
I think the biggest thing when it comes to Ops Center is most guys treat it for equipment and don't look at it as a business tool. So, I mean, within Maverick, we utilize it not only to get information from clients through their Harvest Profit, but we also utilize it as a tool of, if you're not on the farm, do you actually trust your employees? Well, one of the ways you trust, you walk through JD Ops and you watch what they're doing and you check your application data. It has become that tool that gets you out of the sprayer. Ever wish your farm data was in one place? That's John Deere Operations Center. Plan work, keep records, and analyze results all online. Free to set up. See why thousands of farmers trust it at johndeere.ca/precisionag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, distributed under the Real Agriculture Media Network and brought to you by the Heber Group of Companies and Farmer Coach, the first entrepreneurial coaching program for primary producers in Canada. Visit us at farmercoach.ca. Today is a big day for us at the Truth About Ag. We deal in a lot of ag tech, obviously, and whether it's on the investment side or on the speaking side or just using it on the farm. So this might be, I think, Heebs, this is our first guest that took a company from ag tech startup right into the halls of John Deere, and now he's out the other side doing more ag tech. So, Nick, That's where I want to start. So give us the history. Obviously, we know enough about you to be dangerous, but tell us the real history, and obviously finance degree right on to Harvest Profit and now into your AI interface. So let's see it.
Sure. So my story is a bit long-winded, so I'll try to keep it concise. But I grew up in northwestern North Dakota, the town of Williston, which sits right in the heart of the Bakken oil boom, about 50 miles from Canada, 10 miles from Montana. My family farm on my dad's side was right on the North Dakota-Montana border. Very similar crop rotations to what you all see in southern Canada. I would say we're probably a bit more Alberta-like, where not as much moisture, very few row crops. But for me, so when I was growing up, our family farm and many farms in the area were still, like there's a lot of summer fall around, and a lot of small grains. The benefits of no-till and pulse crops really hadn't hit the area yet, and so you needed a really big farm to support multiple families. And so for me, I was just kind of known as I would help out on my mom's side of the mom's family. They farmed, and my dad's side, they farmed. I would help out a little bit, drive a little grain truck. But for the most part, they'd see my dented single cab F-150 come driving over the hill, and they would, I was either out hunting or, crop checking with some girlfriends. So for me, my involvement in the farm growing up was a bit limited. And so I went to North Dakota State I was pursuing a degree in industrial engineering, and I was 1 year away from graduating. I took an engineering economics class that was focused on, evaluating the economic return of projects and CapEx. And I got every question right. So like a 100% in that class, didn't get anything wrong the whole semester. And I enjoyed going to the class. That was the big thing. Like I looked forward to it, where a lot of my engineering classes were just kind of, I don't know, they were challenging, but they weren't intellectually stimulating. And so I made the tough decision. I transferred to the University of Minnesota, bailed out of engineering to go get my finance degree, which in all honesty is like kind of a step down the academic ladder. And then I was lucky enough to join a small but very successful private equity firm in Minneapolis called Shoreview Industries. I was their first undergraduate hire. It's not an industry that hires a lot of undergrads. And so I got to work on, I think in my first week or my second week at this private equity firm, they had made an investment in a remanufacturing company that remanufactured like starters and alternators. And they had put $25 million into that deal like 3 or 4 years before, and they were getting 250 million, 10x return. And so I was in charge of the spreadsheets. Like when you close the deal, there's a flow of funds. Like here's the transaction amount, the bank gets paid. The investors are, some investors get paid, and at the bottom is the entrepreneur. And I got to see some pretty fat numbers on that entrepreneur. And I was like, rather than me the private equity firm was fun, but rather than doing, background checks and insurance due diligence, it was a lot of monotonous, boring work. Like I want to be that guy at the bottom of that spreadsheet. And at the time, this is when spring wheat had went to $20+ a bushel. And I was starting to I had pretty good with numbers and pretty good thinking about businesses. And so I started peeling back the onion on, these farms back home, like what are the opportunities they have here? And it's like, they can forward contract, they could hedge, they can lock in some inputs, but I'm like, oh man, this seems like an amazing opportunity, like a multi-million-dollar risk-free arbitrage. And so then I started talking with friends and people I went to college with, and I was a bit surprised on how just there was not a lot of willingness to lock in what I considered this risk-free arbitrage. Grandpa said, forward contracting doesn't work in Western North Dakota. And, crop insurance, I kind of get it, but I don't really think, I'm not willing to lean on it to make my decisions. So I bailed out of the private equity firm and started doing consulting with farms in the Dakotas and Minnesota, helping them think about basically what Farmer Coach does, thinking about the economic side of the farm, being more diligent about tracking cost of production, tracking profitability by crop, thinking about grain marketing and capital allocation, and doing a lot of spreadsheet work. And the big realization I had was we put together some amazing spreadsheets, but from about March until November, those spreadsheets just gathered dust. Like there was nothing, they weren't getting updated, they weren't getting looked at, they weren't getting relied on and updated. And so I started working on how can I make these more interactive, easier to access? And then, if anybody's ever told you I have an amazing spreadsheet and they show it to you, it's like, it just looks like, a completely different language. It's such an infinite canvas that it's hard to have something that's standard and it's just easy for these things to just fall over in their complexity, and using a spreadsheet from year to year is kind of clunky. So I started working on my own platform. I called it Harvest Profit. I started working on the beginning of it maybe in 2012. Learned how to program a little myself. Had a couple attempts to build it, and finally I found a couple really good local developers in 2016. So finished it, launched in 2017, and it felt like a long time when I was in the weeds, but sold Harvest Profit to John Deere in 2020. So launched in 17, acquired by John Deere in 2020. I stayed at John Deere until March of 2025. And now I'm working on a variety of things, and basically using AI to do some of the things I dreamed about doing 10 years ago. So there we have it. It's a long-winded story there. Maybe probably the longest-winded monologue you've had on this podcast.
You're good. Okay, Hebes, I got one question before he starts.
Yeah.
Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets?
I was all in with Excel for the longest time, but I haven't opened an Excel spreadsheet in a couple of years now.
Okay, Hebes, go ahead.
Yeah, Google Sheets for me. The login experience with Microsoft is just so painful, and yeah.
Nick, I wish I had paid you to say that before you came on the podcast.
Yeah,
but because I grew up in the accounting world where Excel sheets were do or die, Excel and caseware, and there's nothing that pissed me off more than conflicted copies and 20 different versions. And God, I got mad. But we'll let's peel back first. I think it's funny, the private equity finance route, because my kids asked me not too long ago, if you had a choice for us what to take, what would you pick? Of course, most people say doctors, lawyers, you should be a farmer. And I'm like, actually, I'd tell you to take a finance degree and then do a year or two at a private equity firm and then a year or two at a great big farm somewhere else in the world before you came home. Because I think finance and private equity training is some of the best in the world. Not one is for just understanding how to value businesses and how money flows. And then the other thing is, like, there is no better training on earth, I don't think, than private equity firms on how to, optimize revenue and reduce expenses in order to make EBITDA look like the multiple should go up. Like they get taught to be cutthroat. So we actually, even on the ag tech side, right? They're some of my favorite people to pull in if you have to get a founder help.
Yeah. I mean, it's the training and the intellectual horsepower in the industry is hard to beat. And I think that's a big takeaway for me, is like you just end up working with a ton of smart people. It's just kind of osmosis. It just leaves you, like, for me, one of the stories that I've shared, I don't think I've talked to too many people about it, but we put together an investment memo on a deal we were working on, and the person who was above me was a super, super smart kid from Iowa. His name is Matt Ford, and he took the presentation on his desk, and he flipped through it really fast. And then he could see if any of the headlines were misaligned or like the page numbers were off. And he circled them, and I was like, and I'm like a more of a kind of a free thinker, messy desk person. And Matt is different. He's more of a, introverted, like super detail oriented guy. And I'm like, why does that even matter, Matt? He's like, well, if you're going to do it right. And it was like, yeah, why not? Like, it's not going to take me any more time. And so it was like just the intellectual horsepower of the people I was working with was great. And it's funny you say that to your kids now. I have 2 6-year-old twin boys, and when they were born, I was laying out the roadmap. Like, what can I do to make, get them to go to school to be software engineers? And now it's like, all right, let's pump brakes on that one.
Yeah.
And the bigger picture, liberal arts or finance, I'm like, that's has a lot more appeal to me now.
So it's funny, Evan, Nick and I, we actually did some podcasts together for John Deere when he was there. We kind of kept in touch when he was at Harvest Profit, tried to meet up for, 5 years. And then magically I was flying back into Bismarck. I don't even know where I was coming back from. And he ended up being there. And so him and I and one of his buddies went out and drank a few beer and tried to solve world problems. And so obviously we talked about ag tech and we talked about farming. But one of my favorite discussions that I won't forget was you were trying to get set up a retractable roof that wasn't real expensive but worked really well for your pool so the kids could swim more days in a cool climate. And if I remember correctly, you pulled it off. You found one. Yeah,
there's a company out of Canada called Covers and Play. So, one of the lessons that I've learned over the years is that, material goods are, I can't say I've done hard drugs before, but it's like a quick fix, and then it quickly, you buy a new boat and it's fun or new truck, whatever. So after the acquisition with Deere, I had some resources, and I was like, all right, what can I do that's going to, what's a material purchase I can make that has a lot of perpetual experiences, because experiences have a higher yield on happiness than material items. And so I found this retractable roof that it opens outside of the house and closes, and it has like really, if the sun's shining, like we can use it 360 days of the year. So like yesterday we have a younger girl who comes over and helps our boys with swimming lessons, and it just started like hailing outside, and like this structure is just loud, but they're in there swimming and having fun. So that was my one life lesson that I turned into like a material good is like, optimized for experiences and not.
Evan, can you build that into Farmer Coach that experiences provide more happiness than material goods? And we can do that when we talk about shops and equipment purchases.
Just keep needling. Just keep needling.
Okay, I was just checking there.
Well, I think there is some applicability to that statement when it comes to equipment. We have a little bit of land in western North Dakota, and so I've thought about what would it look like if I farm it, and you look at the $2 million Borgo feeder and Big Deer 9RX versus maybe like a Deere 9400 and an 1890. So it's there's. I'd have to do a little bit of research there with farmers how long that new equipment high lasts.
Yeah, not very long, but I'm just going to keep that to myself for now.
Sure.
Heebs, I know you're going to go into AI a little bit with them, and I'm going to say that's over my head for this one. So I'm going to jump into Harvest Profit if you don't mind with you, Nick, just for a couple questions. So what was the hardest part that you thought would be easier when you were actually building it? And that can be from a relationship farmer, what you put into it. And then on the exact flip side, what was the easiest part you thought that would actually be harder?
Sure.
One thing before you answer those, Nick, tell everybody what Harvest Profit is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell everybody that we use it on our farm. It ties to my John Deere, and our Maverick uses it. It's like one of the call it the top 3 or 4 things we suggest farms use. So
yeah,
we're a believer in it. Now move on to the next.
Yeah. No, I realized that I didn't quite pivot my consulting into what software exactly does. And so, one of the problems with accounting, specifically in the US where cash basis accounting is preeminent, is that you have in any given fiscal year, you have transactions from 3 crop years, and it leads the accounting for a farm with cash basis is really just tax management. Like, it gives you no management insight. Over the long term, it can maybe kind of tell you if you're making a little bit of money. And then even if you're doing accrual accounting, you're still missing the budgeting side. And so Harvest Profit is a tool that it's kind of a mix of a budgeting and a historical view gives you a historical view into your crop year financials. So, and it pivots from you can start out with, here's my estimated costs, to, all right, I've bought my fertilizer and I've contracted my grain, and you can contract more. And so you have this view of your crop year based financials on a field level that morphs from budget to actual. So, one of the bigger problems I saw over the years is, it's hard for farms to keep selling crop when the market's going up, because you start to anchor to those past prices. But if you go from a $50,000 profit to a $500,000 profit and use that as your anchor to what you're focused on, it can just change the mindset of the operation. And similarly to, when you're making equipment purchases, it's like, all right, if I'm going to do this equipment deal, and Harvest Profit's easy to, you just plug that number in, and it flows through really easy. And we made it easy to handle things like multiple entities, transferring input prices from one year to the next. If you remove a field from your farm, it removes it from future years, but not past years. The same thing, like in a spread, like you change the acres, like in the Dakotas, we gained some acres as it got a little drier. Well, that doesn't change the historical. So there's a lot of these weird little edge cases in farming that, it's not easy for someone from Silicon Valley to grasp. And so we knew what farmers wanted and what I wanted, and just turned that into reality. And that's this living and breathing P&L that does other things like profit maps and tracking grain contracts and helping with grain marketing plans. But all in all, it's this management P&L that helps farmers think about their business think about and look at the financial side of their business like really any other business has access to.
Well, and I found that Hebes, like for us, obviously we utilize Harvest Profit on the farm, but we also have a whole bunch of clients that do it. And for us, it's the access of us being able to go in and see as they update it throughout the year, as the as applied data pulls in from JD Ops. And that's been the biggest benefit to us, is with all the customers we have that are in it, the transparency. I'm not phoning them anymore to get information. I can just go into the system, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, back to your question about challenges. So when I was doing consulting, I was working with 2 other guys. And so I had this vision for Harvest Profit, and for whatever reason, I made the decision that I'm going to build this out on my own, because I didn't want too many cooks in the kitchen. And then when I have it in a state where I like it, I'm going to present it as these 2 guys named John and Brian. I'm going to present it to them and see if they want to run with it with me. And so I presented it to them and I said, here's this tool I think can make our jobs easier. We can work with more customers, and it's an opportunity. And I said, it needs a few more things done to it. And I said, here's the opportunity I have. Do you guys want to just split this company? It's going to take $50,000 to do it, to finish it. And one thing, they both said no, which, they might listen to this podcast. For me at the time, it was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to pony up more money. Quite the blessing that they said that. But the realization, in my mind, I thought this thing is going to be done with. So $50,000 it was like 400 hours of a developer. Then it's going to be done. Never done. I mean, once you start having customers, you find out, oh, this UI isn't as great as I thought, or, all of the edge cases that come with farming became apparent. And so like, it's really never done. And so I think you run into issues in ag tech where, and what we try to do is like, there's the Silicon Valley, like we're going to create an ERP and charge ERP pricing. There's the farmer mindset of like, well, I can build this and sell it for $100 a year. And I realized like, no, like we're going to, like, we need a staff to maintain this. And so there needs to be some middle ground in there from a pricing standpoint. And Harvest Profit today, I think, is still like $1,600 a year. And it was a price that allowed us to build a sustainable business at a price point that farmers could just pull out their credit card for. But really, this never being done was one of the things that I was a lesson I learned. And then something that was maybe a bit easier, and I consumed a lot of content back in the day, and it was, people. I came to respect that people like to do business with other people. And so rather than like doing all the marketing under the brand of the company, I would just talk about it myself. And like, I trained myself to just like, if I found something that was interesting, just talk about it. And like that type of marketing allowed us to get a lot of customers where all the other companies, like, I know you guys had a relationship with Granular and you got to know some of the team behind them, but from the outside looking in, some of these software companies with bigger teams, like very few farmers would know who the people behind these teams are. And so I thought it was like marketing the business wasn't necessarily easier than I thought, but it was just more fun and natural if you could just talk about it yourself. So.
He caused me pain because as Shout knows, in a perfect world, I'd actually just prefer to be unknown. And there was too many guys like you that prove that just hiding behind a brand and people not understanding your story actually doesn't work very well. And it's a good way to blow a whole bunch of money on paid marketing, which some of my friends in the paid marketing industry won't like. So it was the same thing. It's like, oh, this going to do the odd public presentation, got a lot of resumes and got a lot of opportunities brought to us.
Yeah.
Oh, guess we have to write the odd blog. Oh, Shout's going to convince me to do a podcast. So it was, I completely agree with you. And it all kind of started at that time, that having people understand your story and why it's important to you to get there, and that it wasn't easy to get there. And here's why you're trying to do it is I think adds a tremendous amount of value versus just a corporate brand.
So you guys will probably respect this. I'm building out an office space here that has a few studios in it, and I'm gonna get back and doing more content. But I've also come to like I see the power in it, but I'm also like dragging my feet because when it comes to content, consistency is king. And I'm like, okay, as soon as I decide to push that green button, then I commit to having to do these podcasts. I'm like, I'm not quite ready to push that green button yet. And, I see it, you're in your truck today. Like you gotta keep up the consistency or it just doesn't have power. And so it's,
I was going to say, Nick, for those that are listening, Kristjan's in his truck today, and this was the only hour we had to get this recorded in the last 4 days.
Yeah.
And with my ADHD, Nick, without Evan being the planner, there is absolutely zero chances I could have a consistent podcast.
Yeah.
Zero chances.
Yeah. So anyway, I completely, the power of content and like just being a person and being close to the market is super powerful.
I think the piece too, Nick. So, I mean, I think that's kind of how we got in touch, is watching some of each other's stuff. Right. And the part I liked about yours, and I think it's a part that I've always believed in, is kind of why we got asked to speak, is never once when you were talking about it did I think you were trying to sell anything.
Yeah.
You're just trying to talk about stuff you thought was interesting, whether that tied to Harvest Profit, whether that tied to some business you were analyzing. In today's world, I encourage everybody to follow Nick on LinkedIn, whether that's about AI your content was just telling stories about stuff you found was interesting, not selling. And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Well, even in the blog space, like I've gone through a lot of your blogs, Nick, even to the way back in 2019 is kind of when they were started. And some of the Warren Buffett stuff, obviously Hebert's got a Berkshire Hathaway share on his wall in the office. And I followed Munger in them, but just following some of those, you could see all you were doing was throwing content out there. It had nothing to do with Harvest Profit. It was more on applying it to agriculture and the producers, right?
Yeah. I don't know. There's this philosophy, like my idea was, if I can add value to people, that at a certain point, like if there's an opportunity for them to reciprocate that value, I want to be top of mind. When I started Harvest Profit, I think there were 3 of our competitors, and if you went to each one of their websites, they were like talking shit about spreadsheets. I was like, spreadsheets are awesome. Like, I love spreadsheets. And so then I flipped it on its head, and I made this spreadsheet for farmers course, and I sold it for like $10, and then I gave the money to Farm Rescue, and then I made it free. And so and then at the same time I was like poking and prodding them about, like, these people say see, they don't understand your business. You're always going to use spreadsheets. And then I kept talking about, like, this is the world's best spreadsheet for farmers course, like the number one. And I'm like, it's also the only one. But that kind of stuff was super fun. And I know people, I had thousands of people take that, and it was pretty good. Like, I went into the weeds and tried to make it as amazing as possible. So, like, just trying to add value to people and having fun, I think is a super powerful way to resonate. And I'm sure I pissed some people off along the way too, because I trained my mind to just anything I thought was interesting, I would share it. And some of those were maybe a little rough around the edges, but so be it.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's our motto at its best, eh?
Yeah. So he pivoted into this for me. So Nick, I mean, we're fans of AI too. My one worry in AI and agriculture is there's so much bad agriculture information on the internet. I make sure everybody, as they get into it, it is going to scrub bad info as good info. So just pay attention to what the output is, because it can also confidently give you a shitty answer. But the one thing I'd like you to, to talk about where your head is my one worry on AI for farms is I see a lot of people building app this and app that, and it reminds me of what, the file folder at my accounting firm I worked at looked like 20 years ago, and the Excel spreadsheets, kind of like you talked about, and why you built Harvest Profit is there's different versions in every year, and none of them talk to each other, and so I'd like you to kind of walk through in your mind, if you were a farmer, right, what would be your holistic view on, the outcome you're trying to use AI for when it comes to managing your farm better, et cetera, and how you'd look at, ensuring that these pieces talk to each other in the end. Maybe not right now, but in the end, you don't want it to be that you have to go, prompt 5 different AI apps that you've built to do something, though, and they should be talking to each other.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll step back on, thinking about what AI is. And most people's version of AI is a large language model. And so we have this course called AI on Your Farm, and we're in the midst of this today. We had another session for our 4th cohort. This was week 2 today, but week 1 we talked about, like, what is an LLM, and it's these large language models that have been trained on. I just tell people to assume, like, all publicly available text and transcripts, and if you're Google, it's on YouTube videos, and the goal is to, based on your prompt, to predict the next set of tokens or words. And when I first tried ChatGPT 2 years ago, I was blown away at how smart it was. And then I asked it, who founded Harvest Profit? And it said, very confidently, Harvest Profit was founded in 2019 by Raj Patel and another Indian guy. And I was like, what? Like, no, one of my lead engineers, Jared Krishnan, his dad's from India, so nothing against Indian guys. What ChatGPT was doing was saying, okay, this person asked about a software company based on all of the probabilities in its past training. Most software companies are started by 2 Indian guys. And so it just predicted that for me. And I was like, whoa, shut my laptop. Like, this is scary. And the scary part was how confident it sounded. Well, as we explain in our class, now like AI, okay, it's like its knowledge is still that predicting the next token, but it's gotten better at reasoning through, like thinking through its response to you, and then knowing when it needs to. It has like a tool belt. It's like, okay, now this isn't in my memory. I need to do a web search. Or they're asking about math. I need to use Python to do the math. And so it's gotten really good at thinking through the prompt and its response better and calling different tools. So like the skepticism of AI, like it isn't, it seems like it's just this super smart thing in a lot of different disciplines, and it is, but it was really primed to hallucinations 2 years ago. And now it's gotten better at knowing when to use other tools in its tool belt to give you the best answer. And so there's that. And I think we've helped try to give some more confidence. Like it's still not perfect. It's non-deterministic in its answer. So like you ask it a prompt 10 times, it's going to give you 10 slightly different variations. Versus a deterministic response is like math. What's 5 plus 5? It's always going to be 10. And so these are just different things, and understanding that will help you understand the limitations. And so to answer your question, there's a couple different ways that, in our session today, we were helping people understand. There's a tool that ChatGPT has called a custom GPT. So you could build a custom GPT, which is something that you can load with specific instructions and then sources of information. So you could build a herbicide custom GPT, and you can turn off web search, and you can ask it to cite the sources, and you could give it, like for us, we could give it weed guides from North Dakota State, South Dakota State, University of Minnesota, and Manitoba, and maybe a couple private weed guides. And so then you can turn off the web search and make it cite its sources on where it's pulling its information from. You do the same thing with equipment. And so you can put some guardrails around it with the tools that we have today. But your second part of your question was like, how do you prevent yourself from just building this disjointed set of tools? Like you said, one of the problems with spreadsheets, at our private equity firm, it was, we'd buy a company, it'd be like ABC widget company, financial model V1. And then by the time we were done, it was like V27. It was like, you better be hoping that you're working with, V27 and not V24. And what I'm seeing today with a lot of some of the more advanced growers is like when the cost to produce the code is next to nothing, the skill becomes like, what do you build? Not just building everything. I've seen some farmer built farm management tools that are like just monstrosities. Like you're using all of this. Well, no, I'm not using the accounting feature, but it'd be fun to build. And so like being intentional about setting up guardrails on, just what you're building, and knowing that at the end of the day, like there is the cost of producing the code might be next to nothing, or $20 a month or $100 a month, but producing something building something that's maintainable and having the discipline to just build what you need. Like I write a blog, and I built a content management tool for this blog I'm working on, and it's just done. And I built exactly what I wanted, and it's done. And, I think like maybe once every 2 or 3 months I go in and add a new little, change something with the UI, but like having the discipline to like, okay, start at the end. Like, what do you want? Okay, I want my employees to, have some different knowledge bases where they can ask the questions to, instead of having everything route through the management layer of the farm. Okay, start there and work back. Or what is the deliverable I want? And yeah, starting with that end goal and working backwards, and not, okay, I have this, developer that'll work 24/7 and not complain and not have a day off. Like, what can I build? And, because you can do anything. I still have, like, I don't know, 6 applications on my machine here that I've worked on and built over the years. And it's like, I gotta ground myself and, like, okay, what do I need and want, and work backwards, and not just, because I get a little bit of, I pay for max subscriptions on almost all these tools, and I'm like, they're not working. I should probably put them to work and make them fun. And then I realize
that's what I find, Nick. Right? I think people get busy building stuff they think is fun, but didn't take the time to be like, what is the outcome that myself and my team needs, and then also what kind of decision matrices and guardrails did I use to get there? Right. So your comments on custom, whether it's custom gems in Google, or custom GPTs in chat, or Claude personas in Claude, things like being a canola hedging and speculating expert. I mean, I've got a custom gem on that I can run every morning that goes in, but it's got access to our financials, our break evens. Here's the specific sources I want you to pull from. Here's the buckets of information I want. Same thing, we're working one on equipment right now, where we have all our equipment preloaded in there. So now all of a sudden you take a picture of whatever side of a piece of equipment, and how do I repair this, or what filter do I need? And it has all the serial numbers to go find you the right stuff, right? So I think the custom part, so that you don't have to reprompt and retrain all the time, is something that, not many people even know about that part, to make your life easier, let alone thinking of, like you said, what is the outcome? Am I trying to make my team more efficient? Am I trying to make me more efficient? Am I trying to use this as my custom Wikipedia to get me information that lets me make a decision? Like, what outcome are you trying to get, versus this thing's pretty cool to, show a couple buddies and my wife on Friday?
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. An example that I shared today was, in my mind, it's like, okay, ground yourself in, how can I make my business better, or how can I make it more enjoyable, right? Like, there's a benefit to making it more enjoyable. I was out in Western North Dakota this last fall, and I ran across one of my really good friend's sisters, and she was asking me what I was up to, and I was telling her about AI, and she's like, I hate AI. And I'm like, okay, why? And she brought up some times where it hallucinated. And she is an accountant, and their other brother has a trucking business, and she was explaining some of the work she does for him. I'm like, you're just a human key typer here. Like, this is, I can see where some people might be skeptical of AI. You're the last one. And so her brother takes he does trucking in the oil field, and him and his team handwrite their load tickets. And then he loads them into a Google Drive, and she would hand type them into a spreadsheet, and then hand type an invoice. And she took our course and built some skills to, okay, now, process Jake's trucking tickets. And so, processes, it uses OCR to take what's handwritten and put it into the spreadsheet, and then it uses a confidence score, so she can flag things that, okay, these ones are likely not right. And then it takes those things from the spreadsheet and makes the invoices out of them. And it's like, just making her business so much better and so much more enjoyable. And so, and that's the thing I've been trying to emphasize to people is, you hear these new flashy tools, and even myself, I want to try them, build these agents, but what are the workflows that you want to make better? And what are the processes you want to improve? Because if you don't have those, you're not going to these tools aren't magically going to, parachute into your farm and take over and make things better. You need to set them down the path of improvement that you identify. The human needs to pick the path of most impact in your farm or life. So I think you're exactly right on, is
And I think, Nick, that's where we noticed it the most is everybody hears the word AI and they think big picture. Like I want the be all end all. And honestly, most of the stuff we utilize it for and most of the stuff Taylor's built for the farm, they're the lower end task. It's the data entry. It's the putting the crop production guide into Notebook LM and pulling from it while you're in the field to figure out mixing or creating SOPs even. Like we sent some guys home from Farmer Coach, not this session, but the last one, and it was utilize it to make some SOPs at some pretty simple levels. Or for me, it's drawing proposals for a takeover of another grain farm in a rent scenario, and just those simple things that would have taken you multiple hours. It's an efficiency tool more than I'm using it for the grand all. Like you said, there's so many things you could do with it that I think people are missing out on the simple things you can do with it, right?
Exactly. One of the examples that really opened my eyes was Michael Stake, who I worked with on setting up this course. He made a combine settings advisor, custom GPT, because he raises a fair amount of edible beans and he has an older combine. And in our climate, like you're humid in the morning and then you could be like just hot and windy and dry in the afternoon. And so, and then at the same time, like the combine settings knowledge, you need like an expert level knowledge in those settings for 1 month a year. And then, you put that on the shelf and you go, you're doing your bookkeeping in the winter and then you plant and spray and then, here you're back in the combine. And so like, he is pretty good. He knows how to combine his crop, but, he would, as he was working throughout the day, he would ask questions like, here's what I'm seeing, what would you do with my settings? And it was just like shockingly good information coming out of there. And in farming, you need to be an expert at a number of tasks, but a lot of those tasks are time limited, right? Like you're only using them certain times. And as we get older here, our brains, versus dealing with my 6-year-old boys where, they still have a blank slate on some of their brain, us three here, our slates are full. So to put more stuff on that blackboard, we got to erase something. So that's where AI can help be that expert. And specifically, if you have objective sources of information that you rely on and have a high confidence in, these large language models are just really good at looking and searching and referencing those objective sources of information.
The one we got a manager meeting today, and the reason we're building the machinery one behind with all our machinery loaded in is we'd like to get to the point where, if something goes wrong as an operator, you take a picture of it, you put in your explanation, and get the opinion from Gemini before you phone one of the managers to come give you a hand. And we don't want you to fix it from that, but have that done before you phone, because magically it's actually usually 80+% right on what we're going to do. So I always used to joke that I don't like dead cats, right? I prefer dead cats with a shovel, or even better, a funeral that I didn't get invited to. And so we found it should allow our operators to become shovel ready a lot quicker and help solve problems quicker.
Yeah, no, yeah, those are the perfect type of use cases. And I will say that there are, there's still plenty of need for these tools to get better from a team setting like that. Like, setting up those knowledge bases and then, ensuring that your employees are using them correctly and being able to go and check the answers. Like there's still a lot of room for improvement there, but there are ample different ways to configure these tools to, help be that expert. The one I fed, I think, like our first 2 quarts of this course, I fed all of the video transcripts and the chat transcripts, along with like a long narration of myself about the problem that we're trying to solve, into Notebook LM. And it spun out this podcast that talked about, it came up with this idea that the farmer is the human router and like the human router plot problem. And I was like, oh my God, like that hits the nail on the head. Like the farmer, the manager just ends up being the human router of, info from the employees to, the bookkeeper and the accountant, and like using these tools to, help handle that, help handle a lot of that information that you're having to route around as the farm owner in a more efficient way, and probably a better way, giving better answers and better advice. And then, not having to, once people, it does give the team the ability to like work on things and solve issues themselves. So for most, a lot of people are just trained to pick up the phone and call, but I do think that these tools are giving a bit more autonomy, which most people, love to get better at their jobs and be more autonomous and be given more trust. And these tools can help lay that out. And so making the farm more efficient and more effective and more fun. So
then my question for you, Nick, then is, and we're in an industry that has a very slow adoption curve, to be honest. I mean, we saw how long it took with GPS and sectional and so on. So what were the barriers, I guess, with Harvest Profit when you launched it? What barrier or wall did you hit with some of the producers in getting them to utilize it? And then, with your AI classes, what's the same barriers you're hitting there, and where do you see those?
So it's probably a couple, like the barriers would be a bit different. And one is at Harvest Profit, the farmer using Harvest Profit needs to be high enough on their priority list where they're actually going to sit down for an hour or two a month. And for a lot of people, the to-do list needs to be prioritized by not what you know you should do, but like what you actually want to do. And if you don't actually want to do it, like there's nothing we could do to make it easy enough to do that. And so it's like, it just needs to be of a high enough priority for them to do it. I would say there's some of that plays into the AI. But there's like two other challenges. And one is like, there's so many features and things that you can do. Like, where do you start? It's just a bit overwhelming. And then the second thing is like, there's this negative connotation about, AI and like using things like water and power. Like there's just a lot of negative press out there. And one of them was like, how much water are we getting? Like, it's just so wasteful. And there's a big data center being built a few miles north of where I'm sitting here now in eastern North Dakota. And it's like, it's a closed loop water system. Like it doesn't use that much water. Like the natural gas and like the natural gas power plant in western North Dakota that's right by my farm, it doesn't use much water. Like like just how it works. And so there is this negative connotation of AI that is different than Harvest Profit. And, at the end of the day, my approach is like the approach that most farmers have with farm subsidies or like tax breaks, like Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was a fan, like he, right or wrong, thought that, he personally should be taxed higher because of the luck he had in his success, but he was still taking advantage of every tax break that was possible. And the same with farm subsidies. The vast majority of farmers will tell you, there are some subsidies that, in some disaster policies that we need, but a lot of the stuff we probably don't need, but I'm still going to take advantage of it. And like AI, it's going to have it has some negative effects. It's not perfect, but I think it's just smart business sense to take advantage of it. And it's just like, it's this mental hurdle of there's a negative connotation out there about it. A lot of it's, wrong. Yeah. It's just misplaced or based on information that isn't factual, but some of it is true. And it's it's consuming a lot of resources and it's not perfect, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's intelligence at your fingertips. I used to, the one downfall that I'm seeing is I was chatting with Ian Meyer this morning, who's the founder of the great Canadian ag tech company, Agromatics. They make the LibreCard app. Him and I used to talk every week. And now we talk every quarter maybe. because Ian's like one of these smart friends who I love to bounce ideas off of. Well, now I have that smart friend in my pocket 24/7. So it's like this intelligence at your fingertips. You just have to take advantage of it and just understand that it's not perfect, and there are positives and negatives.
So for those of you still listening, Hebes fell off, so let's blame Elon for the Starlink in the truck that doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep going with you, Nick, if you're okay with it. Just
for
I'm
good.
A few minutes.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, when our CTO came on last year, my extent of AI was 0.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was do this many prompts a day. And then all of a sudden it was he's showing it to our clients. So now I have to learn it.
Yep.
And now I'll go around and talk into my cell phone for hours on end. Right.
Yep.
So what do you see coming forward? I mean, let's look 5-10 years, and I know you can't see the future, although you knew Harvest Profit was going somewhere, but
yep.
What's the next 10 years look like in your eyes in not only agriculture and tech, but just technology alone?
Yeah. I think there's going to be like the cost of producing software and analytics is like going to 0. For a company, there's companies that are into like working in implementation. So like helping businesses leverage these tools and processes, and like there's going to be huge opportunities there. I'd feel pretty good if I, like my friend Ian, who has hardware, like feel pretty good about a business that has hardware and can build a lot of software around it. And I think we're going to so for me, it's hard to judge the efficacy, the quality of the LLM when it comes to something like producing code, because for me, it's like, if it works, great. And I can do some tests and I can test the code. But a few of the developers that I've worked with who used Claude's new Fable model were just blown away. Like it was doing perfect work, which a lot of these LLMs don't. So these tools are just going to get stronger and better, and they're going to figure out different harnesses and ways to use them. And I do think like the opportunity for the farm is, to think about the end goal, like making better decisions, whether that's grain marketing or agronomy or being the most efficient you can with your inputs or your equipment, and working backwards on, okay, maybe I need to, have better analysis on, predictive maintenance to lower my, to get in that bottom range of, repair costs. And so like thinking about all these end goals and outcomes in ways to use these tools to give the analysis to make better decisions, and then make the business operate with, less errors, less breakdowns, and ultimately make it more fun. So we're only going to, the functionality is only going to get, the underlying LLMs going to get better. There's going to be more ways to use it, more ways, like they call them harnesses. So more ways to, whether it's, building a knowledge base or, having something that just automatically goes out and, gives you alerts on grain markets or weather, but really grounded in the fact, like, is this leading to better decisions, a more efficient farm, or something that's just more fun to work on? I think the people that can really focus on those end goals are going to have just amazing intelligence at your fingertips and at your disposal, and doing your best to be open-minded about learning the harnesses, how they can be used, and building things that have an impact and not just, fun, fancy digital toys.
Yeah, and I think we've noticed that too, is obviously agriculture today is way more complex than it was, let's call it 20, 30 years ago. And you wear a lot more hats now as a farmer, whether it's the finance, procurement, marketing. I mean, you name it, there's a million roles, right? And the biggest thing we've seen since, and going back to the whole who can help you implement this stuff, that's essentially what our CTO does for a lot of our farms, is just takes the tools and shows them how to use them, right?
Yep.
And what we're starting to find is that guys, they're I'm not saying it's cutting down on labor, but it's definitely making it so they can keep up with the amount of different roles they have to go through in a day. Yep. Whether that's, like you said, a gem for marketing on the Gemini side, or even Kristjan, like he's talking about the mechanic side. All of a sudden you're fixing machinery and you're speaking to your phone to figure out how to fix something, where in the past you'd be looking for books or you'd be Googling and seeing where you could find the guide. It's just making those not simple, but those tasks easier, and allows you time and more efficiency to actually do everything instead of just being focused on a few tasks a day, right?
Yeah. And I do think that these tools are just ideal for a farm. I like to tell the quick story of, if you have a farm that has $3 million of revenue, if I were to, my shop here is in an industrial park in Fargo. If I were to walk around to any business with $3 million in revenue, they would have a controller. They'd probably have someone doing operations and HR, a variety of managers. And for a lot of farms, it's the farmer and then a handful, maybe a spouse or a sibling helping make decisions. But you can, as the farmer, you can almost utilize these tools like a Claude or a Gemini or a ChatGPT and build that executive team around you. In addition to, using those tools to help your employees make better decisions, you can build your executive team using the intelligence that they've built into these large language models.
Well, and it's almost like a trust factor. Like, I find a lot of guys have trouble with the HR side because it's either, let's call it trust or guilt.
Yep.
And on the trust side, having these models in place and putting the guide rails in there so that your team's utilizing it the correct way and not using the hallucinations, it's allowed for a lot of guys to get more trust in the employees, especially when it comes to something like spraying or something like mechanic side, because that they're utilizing the tech to do it right. So you're not just trusting that they're taking a guess at it and maybe they're mixing the right chemicals. They're actually utilizing it to do the right tank mixes, for example.
Yes. Perfect use case. And it's just going to get better and better on the ways that farmers are using these tools, like these knowledge bases, that type of use cases. There's a lot of people that work in other industries that, checklists and looking up guides and having that stuff at your fingertips. And so I think we're going to see a lot of different tools and ways that leverage that underlying intelligence in a way that lines up with how the farm does work.
Yeah. Okay. I've kept you for an hour, so I'm going to finish you off. I'm going to finish you off with two questions that Heeb's always asked, but obviously he's detained.
Yeah.
First question. Obviously, you can see by the books, Kristjan and I do a lot of reading. What's the most recent book you read?
The most recent book I read, one, my 6-year-old twins are crazy, so I've read a little bit on like how to keep a level head when you have two little terrorists tormenting you. The other book that I'm reading right now is called Ircorruptible or Incorruptible. It's by the Eric Ries, who founded this lean startup. Lean startup was a methodology of just getting a product out into market and iterating based on how customers are using it. And he's found that a lot of startups end up getting just kind of sucked into the financial markets in a way that they end up bowing to their primary mission ends up being financial motivation, and how he thinks that there's a way to build a more holistic company that different founding principles and how you can actually build that into a company. And just thinking a little bit mixing capitalism with a set of guidelines that judge how the business. And so that Eric Ries, that new book of his is what I'm reading now, and it's been quite thought provoking.
Perfect. And last but not least, give me a word of wisdom or a quote or anything you've got in the past that you think has been incremental on your growth.
So I have a couple of family members that ranch, and I was talking with one of them the other day, and the cattle markets have been strong, and I threw out one of my favorite Warren Buffett quotes, and that is like, when it's raining gold, put out a bucket and not a thimble. And I think that that approach can be, things have been, have felt quite skinny in the crop side of the farm for a number of years now. But that's just a methodology that I like, and I think we can all do a better job of like, when the times are good, or you have a winter, or take advantage of those times to solidify and strengthen the farm. And so I've been sharing that thought with some people I have that I know in the cattle world, that it almost always feels like when times are good or when times are bad, that we're going to be stuck in this situation for longer than what we inevitably do. And respect the cyclicality and put yourself in a position where when the roller coaster starts going downhill, you still have an anti-fragile business.
Well said. So $800 canola, guys, that's what I heard, is sell when the price is right. and our fertilizer downscale, buy when it's right as well. So thank you, Nick, for everything you jumped on today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, all good. So for anybody listening, like, share, comment, subscribe, and always remember, that's the truth about ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Heber Group, which includes Heber Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.